You can't let one bad day turn into like 6 bad days. A lot of that is investing in building a company. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have a lot of them. And it's going to be a roller coaster. And if you let one bad occurrence turn into 2 or 3 or 4, it can spiral quickly. When something happened, a day happened, analyze it, correct it, and forget it.
Ryan Darnell is a top investor and entrepreneur
who has founded and funded dozens of early-stage tech companies.
The ability to tell a story and give clarity of what the future is going to be and how this startup could exist in it, that is what allows a founder to sit in a partner meeting with tier 1 Series A investors. That doesn't mean they're going to be successful. That doesn't mean the company is going to be successful, but...
Welcome back to Decoded. My name's Alfie Whattam, and this is the show where I speak to experts about what it takes to build great teams and companies. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button for more great content like this, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. So Ryan, you're an investor in like so many successful companies. So what do you look for when you're deciding to invest in a startup?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, we invest as early as possible, right? So we, even I think in our current fund, we've invested in 10 companies. I think 6 of them we committed to or had a deal before they had a deck, right? Some of them weren't incorporated yet. And, the longer I've done this, the more I've leaned towards investing as early as possible. And, I think from a market perspective, I do think, and there's a lot of talk about this right now, but I do think there's pretty much a barbell, right? Where there's, I think there's 2 buckets of capital right now. I think there is inception based. You were there early. You have a relationship with the founder. You can invest on reasonable terms. And the second pool of capital is if things really start to work, it is basically everyone else, right? In the old world, when I first started doing this, there was pre-seed funds, there were seed funds, there were Series A funds, there were Series B funds, very specific. And, in the 2010s, cloud-based software, it was much more linear growth. It was much more like, hey, we're going to raise a seed round. We're going to prove we can get a few customers, build a product. We're going to raise a Series A. It's normally maybe 2 to 3 times higher than the seed. Then 24 months later, maybe we'll raise a B if things are going really well. And it actually made sense to dollar cost average. It made sense to invest dollar cost average over time. It was more linear growth. I think now it's completely different. I think these companies are growing so fast. I think there's basically 2 stages. There's the stage before anything's built, right? And there's a stage after, and if it really works, every single firm's going to do it. And there's no Series A, there's no Series B. It's just how much are we willing to invest, at what price, and who the founders want to work with. Cost of capital is much different in that pool. And we try to put all our resources in the other pool, which is invest as early as possible. First stage, no stage is too early, very founder and market driven. And we fully leaned into that stage. So that's kind of where we function. Because of that, the things we look for, very, very, very reliant on team, right? I think, the things that, if you look at the companies that have done well for us, the biggest traits are very high aptitude of founders, right? And you get that, you kind of discover that by spending time with them. There's some founders, you're 5 minutes into a call and you're like, I got to invest in this person, right? And then there's some founders, it takes 1 or 2 calls to really understand who this person is. But I think if I were to just kind of bucket it, aptitude's a big part of it, general aptitude. I think desire and enthusiasm, right? You want to invest in a founder who feels like this is their shot and they're going to do whatever it takes to make this work, or whatever it takes. A lot of times it doesn't work, but they are going to spend really every waking hour thinking about this, be obsessed with this. And that's just the founders that have succeeded. That's their mentality, right? They want to spend all their time doing this, and this is the thing they care the most about. Obviously, there's other commitments like your health, your family, things like that. But generally speaking, the enthusiasm and desire to make this work is through the roof. Work ethic's obviously a big thing. And then I think the third bucket is probably just clarity on the thing they want to build, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect. It is very malleable. It is very messy at the stage we invest. But the companies that have worked out the best for us, they may not have had the initial assumptions right. They may have had some things off on go-to-market. They may have had some things off on who their initial customers are. But the big thing they got right, generally the thing they wanted to accomplish, they really understood what they wanted to accomplish, and they really understood what they're marching towards. And they didn't get it right out of the gate. They could pivot a little bit and find their true north. But I think that those are the biggest things that were to really break it down. And once you get conviction on those things, I think you get into more tactical things like, hey, our typical process is, we will spend initial time with the founder understanding those things, right? Is this person high aptitude? Do they have the desire, the enthusiasm, the work ethic? Are we excited about, do they have clarity on the thing that they want to build, and are we excited about that, right? If the answer is yes, we'll spend a lot of time with them in the next meeting, really going through and try to assess, like, are they commercial, right? Like, what's their level of ability to be commercial? Can they sell this to customers? If you think about an early customer, they're taking a lot of risk with a startup, right? Like, they are basically dedicating their resources and putting at least some part of their business process in this startup's hands. And if you're a startup founder and have no customers, you have to be really convincing and tenacious at times to get early customers to use this, right? So we'll think through that. It's always better if the founders, you feel like they will do a great job fundraising. And a lot of times that goes to all the reasons we initially invested, right? But the ability to tell a story and give clarity of what the future is going to be and how this startup could exist in it, that is what allows a founder to sit in a partner meeting with tier 1 Series A investors and be able to access more funding. And that doesn't mean they're going to be successful. That doesn't mean the company is going to be successful. But let's be honest, if you're able to raise money, it increases your probability of success. And then the ability to hire, right? And these all kind of go together, and your ability to tell a great story, be convincing, be tenacious, and have clarity of what you want to do, and is it exciting, right? It's the same skill applied in 3 different ways. And if you think about hiring, no one's going to build a company by themselves. Maybe they will. Maybe at some point someone will build a one-person company. But at the end of the day, you have those first 5, 10, 15 hires are so critical. And if you're going to hire great people, there's so many options for these great people now. And you're going to have to convince a great person to take less cash to join your company, right? And that's the reality. You're going to have to convince them to take more guaranteed cash to join your company, have a lesser initial lifestyle with a future promise that equity is going to be much more, one, the equity is going to be much more valuable. And 2, this person is going to grow as a human and in their career, because you're going to hire a lot more smart people. It's going to be a successful company. It's going to be the type of company that they can, have in a resume or on their resume for the rest of their career, and be able to parlay that into different things over the next, 2 decades. And, we'll walk through all those things, and you just get a sense from a tactical execution standpoint, how good the founder is going to be at those 3 things. And it all kind of goes, the evaluation process. Hey, we're a good fit to work with this person.
Okay. That is a perfect answer. There's so many threads I could pull up there. So look, it's fundamentally what I'm hearing. It's about the character of the individuals in terms of their speed, their tenacity, their obsession, their focus, their ability to create that reality distortion field to get customers, investors, employees bought into the vision and willing to go through them on the pain and the journey and the roadmap. And somebody that is smart and willing to adapt and pivot and iterate and change, but do it in lightning speed, because they got to raise that cash, they got to build something amazing. Otherwise, they'll get stuck in that messy middle of the barbell. Essentially, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example. I'll give you a good a European company that we invested in early. There's a company you may know, a company called Sana in Stockholm.
Yeah.
I use that example a lot because Jill's an incredible founder, and we were the first, I think, fund to invest in that company back in 2018. And he was an incredible young talent. He's 21, 22 years old at the time. It's one of the first companies we invested in where we didn't like the initial thing they were doing. And we said it wasn't going to work, right? And it's, if you look at Sana today, it is powering, basically, it is the source of knowledge for all employees and allowing them to upskill faster and learn faster. And he is applying artificial intelligence to help people learn faster, right, within the corporation. The vision at the time, he was an incredible founder and very articulate, very high aptitude. One of these kids who started coding when he was like 12 and started a company very early. And the ability to tell a great story and hire great people and get people around him. But the initial thing wasn't that interesting. It was selling to K through 12 education, and it was personalized education, personalizing the learning experience for every student at K through 12 education. And we ended up investing anyway, because directionally we thought, hey, using artificial intelligence to personalize the learning experience and upskilling the learning experience for everyone, he was very, very crystal clear on how he was going to do that. He just kind of had the wrong market out of the gate. And we just felt like he was a strong enough founder where we could, he would work past that. And, obviously 1 year later after we invested, he ended up pivoting to basically corporate education. And, now he's, raised a lot of money. He's built a great business. And that's just a good example of like, hey, being very high conviction on the founder and generally the thing they want to do, even if the initial, tactics are a little messy, you just have the faith they're going to figure it out long term.
I mean, those are the things that enable somebody to succeed, and a great case study of what happens if you pick the right horse. This is a quick message to tell you about my company, Alpha AI. We built Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter who screens candidates for you on autopilot. You can make your recruitment process 10 times faster, 90% lower cost, and significantly improve the candidate experience, all with our AI agent for hiring. Learn more at welovealpha.com or click the link below in the description. And now, back to the episode. After seeing like so many pitches and like probably thousands at this point, there must be some more tactical red flags. I mean, apart from just the opposites of what you said. So obviously you need the energy, you need the enthusiasm, you need the intelligence. But is there anything more specific that you see as like a red flag that when you're looking at a deck, when you're speaking to somebody, if this thing happens or if this thing is seen, it kind of throws you off and it makes you not interested?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. There was a company recently that we were looking at, and we really liked the founder, and they were going after a market that had somewhat concentration risk. It was a big market dollar-wise, but there weren't a ton of customers. There was like a couple thousand total customers in the world, right? And so one of the main risks, the job of the founder is also to understand like what are the risks of this business and how do I find ways to de-risk that over time, right? And there was definitely a market opportunity there. And I thought this founder had very high aptitude, could execute. But when we dug into the concentration risk of the market, they actually had no idea. Like they hadn't thought about, they didn't know the answers around how much the top 10 customers control the market. They hadn't segmented the market, and they didn't really understand the concentration risk. And we ended up passing, and maybe they'll figure it out, and it was a bad reason to pass. But it was just an example of a company we liked, and we got into it, and we didn't feel like the founder really understood the nuances of the biggest risk of the business, which is concentration risk. So the biggest risk in the market was concentration risk. And we ended up not investing from that point. But I think that's just one example. There's many flavors of that, but I think the founders that we've invested in that have done well, they really understood the nuances of the market, right? And they may not get it right, but they understood that they understood the biggest upsides of the market. They understood the biggest risks of the market. They understood the nuances of that. And they had plans in their head when you're talking to them, they say, here's how we're going to market. Here's our initial ICP. Here's why we think this is a good idea. But they won't stop there. They will say like, here, if this doesn't work, here's probably going to be the reason. Here's how we're going to pivot that. Here's the different ways we can go if the first thing doesn't work. And they have like a 3-step process kind of at least in their head. It's very malleable. It's very to change. It can change, any day. But like they have thought through everything. And I think it's not really, I'm not in the best position to say if they're right or not, right? Unless it's a market we know extremely well. But I think the things that give us the most confidence or give me the most confidence is when the person clearly knows all the different directions they can go. They know all the nuance, and you have faith that they will steer the ship the right way. Because the only thing that's certain is if you invest everything, like the ship's going to get steered in some direction, right? They're never going to be total true north. They're just never going to be total true north. So the more the founder has thought through that, the more they understand the different ways they can steer the ship if things don't go right immediately. Those are the things that give us confidence to want to invest.
Yeah, like I don't think I've ever angel invested in an early stage business which hasn't changed something fundamental about the company like a year or two later. Like you're always betting on the team, you're always betting on the founders. The idea is there, but it's gonna be a different version of that in a year from now, like 99% of the time.
Yeah, and it's funny too. In our experience, the founders who succeed the most are willing to actually make those changes when things seem to go well on the surface too, right? There's certain founders, there's certain companies in our portfolio who, in our Fund One specifically, because we're in like year 7 of Fund One, we've seen like the kind of the cycles of this, and I think they've reinvented the business 3 times, and 2 times they didn't have to, right? But it's all been for the better, and that's what you want is someone who can kind of see what's next, is willing to make bets. The other thing is I think the other thing I've learned is kind of testing for the level of kind of risk. Is this founder risk adverse too? And that's something that's more subjective. It's hard to uncover, but there's little things, there's little ways you can test for these things. And I think it's really good if a founder is not risk adverse. And there's been a couple founders that we have invested in who have been somewhat risk adverse, very smart, very capable. They may have everything else going, but like they're just slower to make the big change they know they need to make, right? And the founders who aren't risk adverse, they will be one step ahead where they'll tell you, hey, we're going to do something. You're like, wow, that's a big change. It almost makes you uncomfortable, right? You're like, hey, you guys seem to be doing well. Everything's going as planned. Like this, you're dedicating a lot of resources to make this big product change or add this new product or put resources towards this new market. Do you have to do that? And the answer is always just yes, we have to do this. We know we're going to have to do it. And if we don't do it now, we're going to have to do it 2 years from now. And they're just willing to be one step ahead of those things and take their calculated risks. They're not like they just woke up one morning and said, hey, let's do this. But they understand where the market's going and they're willing to bet ahead of that. And even if it makes them uncomfortable, it makes their investors uncomfortable sometimes, but that's a sign, that's what you want. And sometimes they're wrong, right? Yeah. But if you look at the generational companies, more often than not, they have to do that. And a lot of times, most of the times they're right if they're successful.
So before you did all of this, you co-founded multiple startups yourself. How have your experiences, Ryan, as like a builder and an entrepreneur, like shaped the way that you mentor and back others?
Yeah, so we have a strategy at Max Ventures where we invest in a given fund, 22 to 24 companies. And typically once per year, we will actually co-found a company ourselves. And so we've co-founded 8 companies in the last 7 years internally. They've all gone to raise venture capital. It's funny, just giving you a little more background on that. The reason we did it for the first time, I think in 2018, was actually more of a necessity. It was more of almost a necessity because there's a category I wanted to invest in. I did not have a big enough fund to really lead rounds at the time. And I basically just said, hey, you know what, let's start a company in this sector. And
so we incubated them within the fund, essentially.
Incubated. We're not a studio. We're not a product studio. We're not high volume. Like it is more of a very craft approach. And if we decide to do something, we are immersed in it for 12 to 18 months. Like almost like it takes a big chunk of our time. And there's a lot of advantages to that. But we did that, and the things that I realized: 1, I really enjoyed doing it. I really enjoyed the time spent on it. 2, it makes us much better investors, right? Because if you think about, like, take a company we recently co-founded a few years ago, like we will scope the problem. We don't just think of the problems out of nowhere, right? It's very informed. If we decide to go deep on something, we're pretty high convicted because we know it's going to take a large amount of our time. We will scope the problem almost just like a founder does. And, we'll do a ton of interviews. We'll talk to all the different customers, all the different people in the ecosystem, and try to find the thing that we think, the opportunity that we think exists. And, we'll scope it almost like a founder. And then we will typically find early customers and early design partners, customers. And sometimes we'll, even raise a whole round. And before we find the right partner to, find the right founder to partner with. So in a way, you're kind of you spend a portion of your time doing the things that a founder would do, when they're going from taking that like walk through the wilderness to scope something, like go very deep on an opportunity, a problem, and see if there's any commercial interest for it, right? And so, it's part of what we do. We typically do it once every 12 to 18 months. We just got a conviction on something. I think it makes us better investors. I mean, if you go back to the things that I was talking about earlier, the ability to, once you're sold on an actual person, a founder, the next step is usually like, let's spend time together and let's talk through all these things. Like, who are the early customers? How are we going to get them? What's the story to them? Where do you find them? What's your relationship with them? Who are you going to hire? Who are those pools of people? Who's great? What type of person do you need? And I think this makes us better partners at the inception stage. We put all of our effort in the inception bucket, right? And our goal is to be the best partner for the first really 12 to 24 months. And so doing that makes us better at our job. I think it makes us better at being able to evaluate the tactical ability of that founder to operate and actually execute. And then, I think the other two things that I realized very early were the other thing was, I think we got, especially early on in our journey in Fund 1, when not all people knew who we were, I think we got an extra level of respect from founders, and we still do today. It helps us win deals, right? If we decide we want to invest in a founder and they know of a company we've co-founded and had a co-founding role in, and they know of that company, we are like 3 times more likely to win that deal. Right. And I just think there's a level of respect from other founders when they see that and they understand that. The other thing that we didn't actually know happened until we raised our most recent fund was in Fund 2, you meet a lot of people who are kind of at the ideation phase when you're doing this. Right. Yeah. So, if we were going to start a company, let's say recently we co-founded a company in the insurance space, it just over like several months, everyone we would talk to would say, "Hey, you've got to meet my friend. They're the smartest person I know. They're a former founder, and they're going to start something. They don't know what yet. We should talk to them. Maybe they'll be interested in the thing that you're working on." And there's a lot of serendipity in that. And I think we spoke to like 50, this last company, maybe 50 potential co-founders, and we ended up going with the person that was the best fit. But we also found a new investment in that. So one of the companies that hasn't been announced yet in Fund 3, we ended up leading the seed round. Proven founder, had previously built a multi-billion-dollar company, and he I don't think we ever would have talked to him if we weren't incubating that company, and we definitely wouldn't have seen the respect from him, because he was the type of founder who can go out and raise money from anyone. Right? He had done this before. He had a good outcome. He had tier 1 VCs in his last company. And I don't think we are not investors in that company if we are not kind of doing this process. And in Fund 2, we co-founded 3 companies, and we only had 26 companies in that fund total. And then we led 5 pre-seed investments that were sourced through the incubation process. And 2 of those companies are number 2 and number 3 in market cap in that fund. So I think, our LPs a lot of times ask us like, "Hey, is this really worth the time you're spending on it?" I tell them, well, look, if you were talking to a GP you're invested in, they said, "Hey, I spend 30% of my time doing this activity," right? Whatever it is. It allows to have a couple investments in each fund at a higher ownership, right? 2, it makes us better at our job at actually picking investments. 3, it helps us win more deals, because I feel like we have more respect from founders because we do this. And then 4, we sourced around 20% of our investments through this process. And once they hear that, it's and that's why we've kind of incorporated into what we do, because it's just good. It's good for business, to be honest, and we love doing it. That's really the 2 reasons we do it.
I can certainly see the upsides. I mean, it makes a hell of a lot of sense when you put it that way. Interesting. What about outside of all this? Like, earlier on in your life, like a lot of people I speak to, they are super pro in like different areas of life, right? So I speak to a lot of people that became really successful entrepreneurs, really successful investors, and they were like really into like video games or athletics, like early on. You did college baseball. Yeah. Why do you think this is a trend? And I say this like because it really, really is a trend. I'd say like 1 in 3 people I speak to on this podcast, I'm asking this question to, because they were like top 100 League of Legends in the world, or they were, like a superstar when it comes to basketball or something. Like, why is this so relevant?
Yeah, all right, so I played baseball through college, right? And until I was about 21 years old, my only goal in life was to be a professional baseball player. And I think about 3 years through college, I realized I just wasn't going to be that, right? And I think so. I think there's a macro and a micro. The macro is if you were willing to play like division or whatever, any college sports and be very serious about it, you are going to develop just kind of a level of work ethic, time management, grittiness, competitive spirit that you're not gonna it's a way to develop those skills that obviously translate to whatever you decide to do after sports, right? I think that's any sport. I think it could be rowing, it could be squash, it could be football, whatever. If you're willing to like play 4 years of serious college sports, like you're dedicating, your only life is basically that thing and that activity and just going to class and doing your homework, right? It really is. And so it just forces you to go all in on something and be very competitive about something and just work towards a goal at a very, probably a slightly younger age, right? And, I'm very grateful. I had no idea it was going to translate to anything. I grew up in, in a town in Tennessee, and like it just, after you played sports, you kind of just got a job and that was the rest of your life. And, I had no idea. I was kind of preparing for whatever I was going to do for the next, 40 years after that. So that's kind of the macro. The micro, baseball is very interesting because if you think about, there's a lot of analogies into this job and building a company. If you're a founder too, by the way, because if you think about it, like you could be in the Hall of Fame and fail 70% of the time, right?
Yes.
And there's this very high failure rate. There's obviously the analogy to like slugging percentage matters versus batting average in venture, but you have to you have to have a it's interesting. My dad before I was born was like a pro baseball scout for a period of time, and the thing he always looked for was, and he ingrained this in me growing up, was look, you can't let one bad day turn into like 6 bad days, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to have a bad day in a sport like baseball and make it turn into a bad week. And a lot of that is investing. A lot of that is in building a company, right? Like you're going to have bad days. You're going to have a lot of them, and it's going to be a roller coaster. And if you let one bad occurrence, turn into 2 or 3 or 4, it can spiral quickly. And, I think that one of the biggest mental things I got out of it was just the ability to, when something happened, a day happened, right? Analyze it, correct it, and forget it, and understand tomorrow. And all that matters is the next day, the next at-bat, the next thing, right? And I think it's a very, I think as a sport, like it just can help you in a very unique way when you're in something that's very volatile, very competitive, and can be mentally draining at times.
Yeah, the mindset that you're describing, which you can develop by doing high-level competitive athletics, is exactly the same mindset that you were talking about right at the beginning of this podcast when you were talking about what you're looking for in an early-stage founder. So it's so relatable. Yeah,
we actually incubated a company called The Post, which is kind of like YPO for former college and professional athletes. And it's actually been it's become a really big company, and it's run by a former NFL quarterback. And the whole theory was that the interesting thing when you play college sports is, especially today, is you put all your effort into that, right? And then you finish, whether you play pro or not, you finish, and then all of a sudden you pick your head up and like, all right, how am I going to channel this competitive energy into something else, which is not sports, it's business, right? And you look up and you feel very behind, right? Yeah. Especially today, you can be like 23 years old, you look up like, all right, like what do I want to do with my life? And you could have that drive, that desire, but you're looking at kids who have had like 4 internships at Google, SpaceX. They've got a full-time job. You kind of feel like you're behind. But the whole ethos was you're not. You've actually spent the last 4 years like developing a work ethic, a mentality, time management system, competitive spirit, grittiness that actually allows you to sprint after that. And that was the whole ethos, was almost like a YPO for people who had that all shared experience in their background. And it's done really well. It's a really great network, but I actually put my dollars behind this too in a way.
Cool. Ryan, this has been super useful for builders, for investors, for everything in between. If people have enjoyed this and they want to learn more about you and Max Ventures, like where should they go to? What's the best place to direct them to?
I think like we're not we're not as vocal online, to be honest, and maybe we should be more. But I would say just email us. My emails at maxventures.vc, and we love talking to. We love our calendar's full, talking with new people every day. So please reach out.
Amazing. Thank you for your time. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Introducing Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter. She's an AI agent who works 24/7, screening candidates on autopilot, conducting interviews in 30 different languages, uploading all the best candidates to your applicant tracking system. Hire 10 times faster at 90% lower cost and significantly improve the candidate experience. Visit welovealpha.com to start your free trial now.